Good morning and welcome to Scotland Speaks at our regular time of 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning where we've got a cracking show coming up. But first, let's turn to last week's show, to which we've had a terrific response. So I'd like to play out some highlights for you. I interviewed some members of the ALBA Party Youth Wing, and my did they have some interesting things to say. We can certainly look forward to a bright future if we're in their hands. Over to some clips from last week. Christopher, of course, you're a candidate for the ALBA Party in an upcoming by-election, which we'll come to a little bit later on in the programme. But what inspired you to join ALBA, and any stories about Alex you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I joined the ALBA Party shortly after the 2021 Holyrood elections, just because at the time of the formation of the ALBA Party I was an SNP member. I voted SNP 1, ALBA 2, because common sense.
So to be clear, you mean you voted SNP in the constituency ballot paper
and then ALBA
and you voted ALBA
list,
on the list ballot?
which is the common sense viewpoint in my opinion, because it was two majorly pro-independence parties. If the SNP aren't going to get seats on the list, ALBA can get seats on the list, and that gives us a pro-independent sweep of the parliament, the supermajority, at which point gives us the mandate to collapse parliament, get the independence election. But it was the SNP hostility that actually done it for me. It was the we'll not work with anybody, we'll do it ourselves. It's like, well, but you've got a whole other group that don't like you or don't want to support you, that support this other group, and you've got grassroots movements that are falling out with it. And in my opinion, the way I seen it is ALBA the one that are willing to work with those groups, and that for me was enough to tip me over the edge going, nah, I'll join the ALBA Party because that's the one that actually has Scotland's interests at heart.
I think it's pivotal in what we need to get young people involved. I don't think while there's nothing happening that young people are going to do things like attend meetings. Young people who are passionate about independence want to be out in the street doing something that's going to help us achieve independence. So yeah, absolutely, that spirit that was in the air, that atmosphere that was in the air in 2014 was almost contagious, because at the time I was just starting university and that could be a whole new world on its own. But just like going into Glasgow and feeling the atmosphere and seeing the debates happening in the street and seeing the people rallying and mascots going around and people just having debates, and there was always something happening to try and at least raise a little bit of awareness that the referendum was happening. So it was just a whole different atmosphere to what we have at the moment. I think a lot of people have been worn down by some of the politics that's been going on. I know personally, myself and a lot of people that were very active in 2014 or just after 2014 because they were mobilised by the referendum, have lost a little bit of interest or a little bit of motivation. We've definitely reduced our pro-independence activists for certain, because I know a lot of people that are just not active within politics at all.
But do you get the impression that everyone is engaged in politics as you are?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that modern studies is probably one of the most popular subjects within my school. People in my school are engaged in politics for lots of reasons, mainly now about independence and Palestine, which is why I think it's amazing that we are standing up against this genocide that's happening in Palestine.
We, of course, the ALBA Party have absolutely said there's a genocide going on in Palestine. Now, you were a student of modern studies, you're doing advanced higher
history.
The advanced higher history, and you're doing politics now, politics higher, I think, in 6th year. But you performed really well, did you not, in your exams last year?
Yeah, I got 4 A's and a B, so I'm into the University of Glasgow.
And what are you going to study at Glasgow?
History and politics.
History and politics, great. So now to this week's show, where we're going to be discussing an exceptionally important item of business, which is the Scottish parliamentary elections of 2026. What do the ballot papers look like? How many do we get? How are we supposed to vote? Is it by number? Is it by crosses in the box? All of these important questions, which for some remain a point of confusion, will be addressed just after the break. So stay tuned and we shall see you then. Welcome back, and I'm now delighted to be joined in the studio by Callum Ansell and Robert Reid. Welcome to Scotland Speaks. Now, you've both been behind the scenes in many ways, which we'll come to, but it's probably the first time in front of camera for both of you on this programme.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Well, welcome to you both. Now, you are both headquarters staff at ALBA Party. Now, most people get the impression when we talk about headquarters, it is a massive operation of lots and lots of people, but actually, it's the two of you and Corey Wilson. And being a small team means, of course, the loss of Alex must have had a huge impact on you both. I thought it'd be good, as we always reflect as much as we can in these programmes on Alex. Rob, you must have had some good stories with. Did he work you hard?
Yes, so many good stories, and he absolutely did work me hard. But I think all of us at headquarters enjoyed that. It really, he brought things out of you that you didn't perhaps knew you could do, and always encouraged you to kind of better yourself. And that in that way, he was the greatest boss ever. But so many stories of being with Alex over the last 2.5 years of his life. It's incredible. I mean, I think Callum will empathise with this, but Alex living in Stricken was more of a pain than anything else, and so there was lots of time on the road. And one memory that sticks out to me, because it shows a kind of different side to Alex that a lot of people perhaps don't know, but beyond the kind of political persona. We'd stopped off at my house one day, and we've done this countless times, but as I get in my car, I hear the door shut behind me, and I see Alex is coming out, and I think, oh God, I hope my mum's ready for this. So he comes in, and my mum's really house proud, and so she hates unexpected visitors. But so he came in, she was stunned, and my dad was working out in the back garden, and so my dad had a huge admiration for Alex. He was the reason he joined the SNP, the reason he was a pro-independence supporter. And so I went and got my dad to come in, and my dad was again starstruck. And my mum had ran off to the toilet to clean the toilet just in case Alex was going to use it. And he added like an extra 45 minutes to our journey, but it was well worth it, because he just sat and spoke to them at length about a whole range of things. He was talking to my dad about military drones, he was talking to my mum about painting the fence, and it was just a fantastic experience. And I think that's one aspect of Alex's character that perhaps people, the kind of ordinary public, don't get to see, is how much interest he took with staff members and friends, family, and took special interest in what was going on in our lives, what was important to us, what our family was like. Even, I think last year, he gave my mum and dad an anniversary present, which I think goes above and beyond what most bosses do for their staff. And that is one example of what a fantastic person he was, beyond politician. Everyone knows what a fantastic politician he was, but as a man, he was kind and caring, and he's so sadly missed.
And the funny thing is, you really could talk to him about anything. Yeah. There wasn't a topic that he didn't have something to say or some kind of opinion.
And I think in your case, Callum, it was particularly, you like talking about history.
Yeah.
Especially when we used to do the Hidden Heroes section on Scotland Speaks. I know you took a great interest in his analysis of history.
Well, we had the perfect conversations, because he knew a lot about the 1600s. I knew a lot about the earlier kind of 900s. So when we were talking, neither of us could contradict each other with, oh, no, that's not right, or anything like that. And we could have nice conversations that flowed about that. But we also talked about films a lot. Surprising how into films Alex was.
We love movies.
I think he was greatly disappointed at how poor I was with my film knowledge, actually.
That would have been the most disappointing thing to him. But I don't think I ever would have seen The Hunt for Red October had it not been for Alex. And that's one of the best, of course, is Sean Connery.
Indeed, it was Sean. But I mean, I suppose it speaks to, as you say, there was so much more to Alex than the political genius. But in terms of political genius, he was keen to share that with people around about him. I mean, I always got a sense of he wanted people to learn from it, and no doubt he expected a lot from you, being, behind the scenes at headquarters, but also wanted you to learn from him. Did you have any moments, Callum, when he gave you what for, maybe?
He absolutely chewed me ear off a couple times. Most of the time it was warranted. I think I'll always cling to the one time. I sent him some statistics that I'd been working on, and he gave me a very angry phone call back to tell me these statistics were wrong, there's no way they're right. And he's an economist, so you don't want to contradict him about statistics. So I said, I'm 99% sure I'm right. He said, well, that's not 100%, get him right and get him back to me. And he hung up angrily. And I think within 2 minutes, before I'd even opened the document again, he called back to say, sorry, yep, I've had a look at the statistics, they're correct, thank you for your hard work. And he apologised and said he was angry about something else and he was just taking it out on me. But it was just nice to get that call to say, I'm sorry. So even if there's times where he did chew your ear out a wee bit, if it was ever unwarranted, he would apologise for it, which is nice.
That's the key point as well, and that's one thing he always did. If you did fly off the handle or anything like that, he would always call back. I had the same example with, and more statistics actually.
It's always statistics.
And in this case, I'd done something I shouldn't have, but he did call back within 2 minutes. I'm like sometimes up like a rocket, down like a stick. But it was good. It kept you on your toes. And you see people complain about being such a difficult boss. It brings the best out of you, especially if you're running a country. You want to be, or you'd expect our politicians to be and their staff working around the clock to ensure things worked. And that's probably why things did work when he was First Minister.
I was going to say Scotland might be in a better position now if that work ethic continued at the top of government and across the Scottish Parliament, some of which we've seen relatively recently, where the Scottish Parliament hasn't been the best example of itself across a number of different fronts. But you had a lot of fun with Alex. I mean, we both filmed with Alex, even when you, Robert, had your excellent result in your by-election. Remember, Alex on the campaign trail with you, and that was fun in the street, a little bit about that. But also, you might remember when we were filming a video for you when he was endorsing you as a candidate. We were at the People's Palace in Glasgow at the time, and we just collapsed into laughter. I don't know how many takes we did.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I mean, because my first experience in that kind of environment with Alex was I was standing as a candidate in 2022 in the local elections, and my University of Aberdeen, kicked us out of the university.
And why was that? Yeah.
Because we were deemed to be a threat to minorities on campus. I mean, it was ridiculous, but Alex has ever said, well, we're going to have it outside. And I remember walking around the square with him as we kind of enter in front of the audience. And as we were walking around, he was kind of nudging me, walk this way, son, come on this way. And it was little things like that, coaxing you through it. And he always made you feel at ease. And I always feel like if you had a conversation with Alex and you didn't learn something, then you were doing it wrong, because there was always something there you could pick up on and learn from. And
you mentioned the word son, because sometimes when you was irritated, you might say, he'd end it with son, and then you knew you had to fix it. Callum, obviously you've had a lot of experience with Alex, because you were with us from 2021 at party inception, which takes us on to some of the work we did with Alex and then where that leaves us now. And the voting system was the key thing, and understanding about that voting system and compiling videos to make the public aware was something that you did in 2021. In fact, let's take a look at a video that you compiled for that election.
This is how the system used to elect the Scottish Parliament really works. Everyone gets 2 votes, one for the constituency and an orange coloured paper for the list. Both should be marked with a single X. ALBA, as an independence party, is not competing against the SNP in the constituencies, but the success of the SNP in these constituencies means that regardless of how many votes they get on the list, they get little return. These votes are wasted. At the last election, almost 1 million independence list votes for the SNP elected only 4 MSPs. In most areas of Scotland, they didn't count at all. In the west of Scotland, 135,000 SNP list votes were wasted. In the north east, 137,000 SNP list votes elected, 0 MSPs at all. In central Scotland, 129,000 SNP list votes counted for nothing. In mid-Scotland and Fife, 120,000 SNP list votes were disregarded. In Lothian, the figure was 118,000 votes, and in Glasgow, the figure was 111,000. You get the picture. All these regional list votes which could help Scotland go into waste. The rise of ALBA in this election changes that. ALBA list votes count across Scotland. This is Scotland's independence opportunity, and the more people vote for ALBA on the list, the stronger Scotland's Parliament becomes. To stand up to Boris Johnson's London Tories and to insist on progress towards our independence. ALBA will tip the balance in Scotland's favour.
Coming up after the break, we are going to discuss that video in full and what it means in 2026. If people had voted differently in 2021, what would we be looking like now? And if people vote a certain way in 2026, can we have the independence that we yearn for? See you shortly.
Water is life, but not all water is equal. Our water ionizer restructures and alkalizes water for optimum hydration and detoxification, recreating the planet's ultimate water sources, found in lightning-struck lakes and newly melted icebergs. H2 Pure Source. Change your water. Change your life.
Welcome back to Scotland Speaks, where I'm delighted to be joined by Callum Ansell and Robert Reid, sometimes known as the Backstreet or Backroom Boys in Alba Party headquarters. Welcome to you both again. Now, just before the break, I showed a very important film, Callum, that you compiled for Alex, which was an explanatory video about how the election system works in a Scottish Parliament election. So let's specifically talk about that, because I have been concerned, because I've been on social media like you are, and chapping doors, that some people still don't actually understand what votes they get in that election, what they look like and how they can vote. So I'm going to come to you first, Callum, to explain a bit about that.
So in the polling station, you can get two ballots. So one of them is a kind of peachy coloured ballot paper, and the other one is a kind of purpley lilac, would you say? Lilac coloured ballot paper. The purpley one is your constituency vote, so that's your local MSP, and the peach colour is your regional vote, so that is used to select the usually 7 regional MSPs in each region of the 8 regions of Scotland.
So in the lilac purple coloured vote, you're voting for your constituency MSP, so it'll be a person's name on the ballot paper, and the other vote on the beige buff colour one, peach colour one, it's for the list vote, which is will make up the regional MSPs, and it's predominantly party names that are included on that ballot paper. How do you mark those votes? Is it crosses? Is it numbers?
So it's the same for both ballots. It's just a cross on the individual or the party that you're voting for. So typically on the purpley ballot, it will be your preferred candidate for your local MSP. And typically on the peach ballot, they've usually got party names and a kind of party.
It's one cross in each ballot paper.
One cross on each paper. You don't number anything.
It's important to note as well, you don't have to vote on both. You can vote for one on the you can just vote for a party on the list and ignore your constituency ballot, or you can do the reverse, but you don't have to vote on both. They're not connected in any way.
It's important you make that point, because I actually saw somebody on X saying relatively recently, if I don't vote on the constituency ballot, does that mean I cannot vote on the list ballot? Which of course you can vote on both, or none, or just one. But a lot of people are using number terminology, like vote this one, vote this number two. Given that Scotland also operates STV ballots, single transferable vote ballots, in local authority elections, do you think it might be confusing if we use that terminology, and some people might think you number it by way of preference?
Yeah, I think absolutely that's where the confusion arises. If you think back to the 2022 local elections, the SNP's message was SNP 1 and 2. Where ALBA put forward, vote for ALBA 1, SNP 2. And so people, I think, are still in that kind of mindset. Last national Scottish election that we contested, that's how we should vote, and it's not in any way connected. It's almost like two first past the post ballots, but the proportionality doesn't come from ranking. It comes from when the votes are counted afterwards, and then they get divided by a certain number of how many number of seats a particular party wins. And so it's important not to go into the ballot box and vote for all the candidates on the list. That's not how it works. The only vote that would count in that instance would be your number one ballot. And so really we need to get our minds away from saying SNP 1, ALBA 2, or vice versa, and getting it in the mind of saying list vote ALBA. It's about voting ALBA on the list, and that's the key message that we need to get out to our voters and our activists.
So 2 ballot papers, we know the different colours, we know it's 1 cross in 1 box on each of those ballot papers. And as you said, you pointed out on the video that we've just seen, Callum, that you compiled, we're very clear there, it was the hashtag list vote ALBA. And I know on the information that's coming out that you're tweeting out via our accounts and putting on other social media sites for us, that we're using that terminology, list vote ALBA, and moving away from using the numbers, because the reason that people find it confusing. And as you say, returning officer faithful with that, a 1, 2, 3, 4 will take the first vote as the vote, and that might not be what the electorate want. So let's move to what could have been and what can be now. In that video, Callum, that you made, you compiled using the statistics verified by Alex, finally,
eventually,
after your phone call, as to what the Parliament would have looked like in 2016 if people had used their list vote wisely, i.e. being because so many SNP members of Parliament were elected via constituency, votes for them were being wasted, we have to use the terminology, wasted on the list. And that, Robert, brings us to some of the statistics and slides you've been compiling. I'm taking that the figures are accurate because we don't have Alex to ask.
They're the exact same figures that Callum has. He has a little database that we can put numbers through now.
So let's take a look at some of those slides and let's talk us through those slides. Let's look, for instance, we'd said in 2021, in fact, Alex had said, we need a supermajority if you vote this way. And at that time, I should add, at that time the position was vote SNP in the constituency and vote ALBA on the list. We would have had a completely different result in that election. Talk me through the various different regions and let's see what those votes would have looked like.
Yeah, of course. So in central Scotland in 2021, 134,000 SNP list votes returned 0 SNP MSPs. Instead on the list, 3 Tories, 3 Labour and a Green were returned. Now if all 134,000 SNP list votes had gone to ALBA instead, we'd have returned 4 pro-independence ALBA MSPs along with 2 Labour and a Tory. That had cut the number of unionist MSPs in half. It's a similar story in the S-City of Glasgow. In 2021, 148,000 SNP list votes returned 0 SNP MSPs. Instead, 4 Labour, 2 Tory and a Green were returned. Now if independent supporters had backed ALBA on the list instead, there had been 3 pro-independence ALBA MSPs in the Scottish Parliament, 2 Labour, 1 Tory and a Green. Again, cutting the number of unionist MSPs in half. In Mid-Scotland Fife, in 2021, 136,000 SNP list votes returned 0 SNP MSPs. 4 Tories, 2 Labour and a Green were returned instead. Now, again, if those 136,000 SNP list votes had gone to ALBA instead, there had been 4 pro-independence ALBA MSPs alongside 2 Tories and a Labour, again cutting the number of unionist MSPs in half. In 2021, in the Lothian region, 141,000 SNP list votes returned 0 SNP MSPs. Instead, 3 Tories, 2 Labour and 2 Greens were returned. Now, if these votes had gone to ALBA instead of the SNP, there had been 3 pro-independence ALBA MSPs on the regional list. Onto the North East of Scotland, in 2021, 148,000 SNP list votes returned 0 SNP MSPs. On the list instead, there were 4 Tories, 2 Labour and a Green. Now, if these independence votes had gone to ALBA instead, there had been 4 pro-independence ALBA MSPs returned to the Scottish Parliament. One of them in the North East would have been Alex Salmond. In the west of Scotland, 152,000 SNP list votes returned 0 SNP MSPs. That's the highest of any region in Scotland. Instead, 3 Tories, 3 Labour and a Green were returned. Now, what would have happened if these votes had gone to ALBA instead? It's the same story as elsewhere. 4 pro-independence ALBA MSPs would have been returned to the Scottish Parliament. Now, on to the final 2 regions. Now, in these 2 regions, the SNP did manage to pick up 1 list seat, but we're going to show you how actually, if you're a pro-independence supporter in either of these regions, it still makes sense to back ALBA on the list. Because in South Scotland, 136,000 SNP list votes returned just 1 SNP MSP, 3 Tories and 3 Labour. Now, if those 136,000 list votes had gone to ALBA instead, there had been 4 pro-independence ALBA MSPs as opposed to just 1 pro-independence SNP MSP. And finally, the Highlands and Islands region. In 2021, 96,000 SNP list votes returned just 1 SNP MSP, along with 4 Tories, a Green and a Labour. Now again, much like South Scotland, if these votes had gone to ALBA instead, there had been 4 pro-independence ALBA MSPs in the Scottish Parliament as opposed to just 1 pro-independence SNP MSP.
So in all, Robert, what you're telling us that over 1 million votes for the SNP on the list ballot paper, your peach buff coloured ballot paper, only delivered 2 MSPs in the whole of Scotland.
Yeah, that's correct. And if everyone that voted SNP on the list in 2021 had voted for ALBA instead, then we'd have 30 pro-independence ALBA MSPs in the Scottish Parliament, cutting the number of unionist MSPs in half. It's a no-brainer to spread your vote and vote ALBA on the list at the next election.
Callum?
It's also important to bring up the impact that would have had on the SNP's number of MSPs, because they would have gone under those circumstances from having 64 MSPs just down to 62 for the benefit of an extra 30 nationalist MSPs in Parliament. And the payoff is enormous.
So let's just repeat that because it's so important. They would have gone from the SNP having 64 MSPs overall to just dropping the 2 if people, instead of voting SNP in the list, had voted for ALBA, from 64 to 62. But that would also have meant, on the other side of the equation, 30 ALBA MSPs, which would have delivered, again to quote Alex, because how can we not, to the 2021 election strategy, which was brainchild, was a super majority. Now, given what's happened over the past 5 years, an adventure to the Supreme Court, repeated no's to questions and applications for referendums, what could, in your view, a supermajority for independence in the Scottish Parliament have meant practically for the cause of Scottish independence?
I mean, from a practical standpoint, you've got the influence of having the top two largest parties in Parliament both supporting independence. So just every single political interview, TV show, everything like that, you'd go from having, 3 unionists and a nationalist to 2 nationalists representing the 2 biggest parties and 2 unionists. You could at least kind of level the playing field like that. But I think you would also add just a degree of authority to the national cause by the fact that there's more than one large party in Scotland advocating for independence, rather than it kind of all the eggs being in the basket of the SNP. So you could have the second largest party kind of holding the feet to the fire of the SNP to make sure they're actually making progress on independence. And if they're not, there's a party of 30 MSPs there to to hold them to account for that.
Now, of course, you have made a new film, Callum, based on the election system. Let's just have a look at that.
Here's how the Scottish elections work in 2 minutes. Scotland is split up into 8 regions. Each region has around 9 local constituency MSPs that you vote for using your lilac-coloured ballot paper. This vote is simple. The candidate with the highest vote in each constituency wins the seat. Each region then has to elect another 7 MSPs on what's called the regional list. These 7 are elected using your peach-coloured ballot paper. Here you vote for one party. Each party's votes are counted up and then they are divided by the number of seats that party has already won, plus 1. For example, in 2021, the SNP won 9 constituency seats in the North East. The 148,000 votes they got on the regional list were divided by 10, giving them just under 15,000 votes. The other 133,000 votes were wasted. This meant the SNP did not win a single seat on the regional list in the North East of Scotland. Despite getting the most votes in every region, the SNP only won 2 of 56 regional list seats up for grabs, with unionist parties picking up 46 of them. If, however, SNP voters had decided to back ALBA on the regional list instead, the 46 seats won by unionist parties would have been cut to 24. The SNP would have sacrificed just 2 single seats, and in return, the second largest party would have been the pro-independence ALBA party with 30 seats. It would have been an independence supermajority in the Scottish Parliament. In 2026, don't waste your vote. Vote ALBA on the regional list.
So that video, Robert, obviously gives an indication of how, if you are a nationalist or even if you want competent government in 2026, how you need to vote to make sure votes aren't wasted and unionists aren't coming in through the back or front door, to put it that way. Because the reality is, if people do not use the electoral system wisely, we're going to have much of the same old Westminster government from London, with Sir Keir Starmer offering no difference despite electoral promises to the contrary in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was a system, let's not forget, that was designed to prevent a nationalist majority. Now in 2026, we've got an opportunity to ensure that we can use that system to deliver a pro-independence government and deliver independence for Scotland, because ALPA is putting forward this election, and we're going to call on the SNP consistently until the election to back our strategy that a majority of votes cast on the list would be a mandate to deliver independence. Now that's not a radical or particularly new strategy, it's a strategy that the SNP had prior to devolution, except it was in a different parliament. A majority of votes and MPs for the SNP back pre-devolution would have been a mandate for independence. Now, we don't want to go down that route. That route's been forced, we're being forced down that route because Westminster continues saying no. Now we can either sit on our laurels and say, well, they've blocked it and we might as well pack up and go home and give up on independence, or we have to find an alternative route. And the only route available is via an election. And that's why ALPA will continue to make that case. And I see on social media, I see when I'm knocking doors, the national support is receptive to that. It's time that the Scottish Government followed with us on that and deliver independence for Scotland.
But of course, this isn't just voting for nationalist MSPs for that sake, because some will argue correctly, in my view, that SNP MSPs were voted into the Scottish Parliament to deliver on multiple mandates for independence and haven't done anything about it. Therefore, it's very clear that if people are voting in the manner in which we're asking them to vote, which is voting for an independent supporting candidate on the lilac-coloured ballot for the constituency MSP, and voting their list vote for ALBA on the buff-coloured or peach-coloured ballot paper, means actually voting for independence. And of course, we are seeing in the ALBA party that list vote for ALBA, we're asking other independence parties to support that initiative. Because we have to be clear to the electorate, 50% of which, as it currently stands, as we knock doors, aren't even going to come out and vote because they think it's pointless, that there is a point in coming out to vote. Callum, in terms of election turnout, how important is it that those whose doors we knock who say we're not voting again because it's pointless, we last voted in 2014, how important is it for us to get that message out to them that this vote is going to be meaningful because of what ALBA is proposing?
I mean, it's obviously crucial. There's a real opportunity in 2026 to use this system to absolutely maximise the impact for independence. And it could be, that we have a repeat of 2021 where you have an absolute mountain of independence votes that basically are just wasted on the regional list. And we continue down the same route of really no progress towards independence over the last few years. Or we put those more than 1 million votes to use to actually promote the case for independence and to get independence this time. If that regional list vote is the vote for independence, this is your chance to vote on something Westminster have denied us the chance to vote on since 2014 and will continue to do so.
Yeah, I think it's important to note as well that there are other pro-independence parties, like the Greens, for example, but they've demonstrated over the last 5 years that they are completely incapable of holding the government to account on independence, delivering on a mandate for independence. And so
I mean, are we really asking the Greens to hold the government to account on independence when Lorna Slater is happy to do a deal with Labour, when independence isn't even their number one priority?
Well, exactly. I think independence only crosses green lips when an election comes around. With an ALBA MSP, you've got somebody that's absolutely committed to independence.
So as we've obviously established, I mean, I don't want to pinpoint you on the politics of it because you're in your roles respectively, you're working to promote the ALBA party message, which is clear: vote ALBA on the list, and if you're voting on the list, any party that really wants independence should be telling all of their supporters to come out and vote for ALBA on the list to maximise independence and show it as a positive vote towards that, so that becomes the mandate for independence. Your role specifically is to create the graphics and help create a narrative behind the scenes that's going to capture the imagination of the people and get them to come out and vote. How confident are you that you're going to be able to deliver that in the year that we've got to get across the line?
I'm very confident that we'll be able to deliver that.
You were crediting a graphic to the BBC the other day that turns out I made. So yeah, the graphics are obviously of the highest of quality. But
no, I don't think the BBC is a standard you should set for yourself.
That's very true.
Well, let's what graphic was this? Because I think our viewers would like to have a look at it.
Should show on the screen.
It's shown on the screen now. It was a mock of what would have happened in 2021. It showed a sea of unionists changed to a sea of nationalists, ALBA MSPs, and it looks like it came from the BBC, but it was actually Callum that made it. But on to that point about are we confident? Yeah, I think we are very confident that we'll make that breakthrough. I think Alex always said it gets to that tipping point, and once you reach that tipping point when people think that we're a credible alternative on the list, then people will flood to us, and we're reaching that tipping point now. And I think it's actually around about the same time that he set. I remember being in a meeting with him last September or July, and he said by March next year we need to be winning seats in the election across different polling companies, and that's what we're seeing now. We've got Find Out Now and Norstat polling us to win seats, and what's significant about that, despite what some people might say online about the quality of Find Out Now or Norstat, they were 3 and 4 in the most accurate pollsters at the last general election. And so I think we're in a very good position, and I think it's only going to continue to build as long as we get that message out there and get people chapping doors and getting that message to the voters.
Well, Callum, I'm sure Alex would be delighted that somehow or the other you got yourselves, or indeed the ALBA party, on the BBC, even if surreptitiously and without credit that was due. And of course, it is our duty, as we've worked with him for so many years, to make sure that we deliver what he knew that we could deliver in this 2026 election, which is ALBA MSPs holding other nationalist MSPs' feet to the fire and delivering on independence. No need for any other elections. This is the election, and we should actually call it the independence election of 2026. So you're both going to have a huge hand in getting the message out there, and I thank you very much indeed for joining me on Scotland Speaks to discuss it, and I have no doubt we'll be hearing from you in the future. Callum and Robert, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And with that, we come to the end of this week's show, and please do take some time to look at the graphics that we've given you today and share them. We'll make sure there's many opportunities via Scotland Speaks and indeed the ALBA Party website to share the message far and wide that we need people to understand other political parties who believe in independence to treat this list vote in the 2026 election as the vote for independence. That is the independence vote. And how do we do it? We're saying you do it by using your vote to its maximum potential, and that is voting ALBA on the list. And that is a message we'll be taking to houses across the country in the coming year. Meanwhile, thank you very much for joining us on Scotland Speaks. Do stay tuned to next week's show. We'll be coming up with another interesting interview. But for now, take care.